Alright everyone, today we are going to be modeling cellular respiration. So you are going to need your models and a red, yellow, and black colored pencil. So go ahead and get those ready. We're going to use a full page spread here, so get your notebooks out and we are going to start by drawing glucose. So glucose has the chemical formula C6H12O6. And you get your glucose from food. And the reason that we're starting with glucose is because our mealworms are eating glucose and you eat a lot of glucose, and we've talked a lot about how carbohydrates, particularly glucose, are used for energy. So this is the process of how those are used for energy. Now, drawing glucose can get a little bit tricky, so I'm going to kind of start over here, and I like to start with the oxygen. So I'm going to draw an oxygen atom, and oxygen is going to be bonded to some carbons, and it's going to form a ring. So I'm going to have a carbon going that way, carbon. There needs to be 5 carbon in this ring, but because the oxygen is also there, it's going to be a 6-pointed ring because of that oxygen. Now, oxygen needs to have a total of 2 bonds because it also has 2 pairs of electrons. So that's my start of my ring structure, but you'll notice that there are only 5 carbons here, and there should be 6. Well, the 6th carbon comes off of this one right here, and so we're going to have a carbon, and then carbon needs to have 4 bonds, so we're going to have some H's and some OH's. Oxygen can only have 2 bonds. That H needs to come off of this carbon. So this carbon now has its 4 bonds, hydrogen has 1 bond. And then let's go back kind of to the beginning here. We're going to start with this carbon here. So what's going to happen is each carbon is going to have an OH and an H. And I'm going to put these just kind of where I can. So I'm going to have an OH and an H, and OH, and that brings me back to this carbon right here, which has 1, 2, 3 bonds right now. So it needs 1 more, and it's just going to have a hydrogen. Now, hopefully, this crazy thing has all the right amount of stuff. So I'm going to start with my black colored pencil, and I'm going to quickly shade the carbons black. So far I've got 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon. Red is for oxygen, so we should have 6 oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are part of those OHs, and then the 6th one is what's inside of the ring. And then hydrogens are normally white, but I don't have white colored pencils because I'm writing on a white page. But let's make sure that we have all the right number, 12 hydrogens. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so that's our structure. Now it's time to build it. So go ahead and get out that model kit. And you might need to dump this onto your tray. So you were given a tray. I still did not get a tray. And let's start building. So to start building this, I'm going to start with an oxygen, and I'm going to bond that to a carbon. And then I'm going to build this ring. So it's going to have 5 carbons in the ring. 2, right, so that's my ring. You'll notice that it's kind of bent. That's okay. So I've got my ring here, and now it's got one carbon coming off. If I put this just how it is on my model, this carbon here is where that last carbon is going to attach. Some of these bonds really don't want to work. All right, now I'm going to start building this top part here. So my carbon is bonded to an O, bonded to an H. And then on the other side, I've got an H and another H. All right, so we've got that there. Now, as I go around, I know that I'm going to have some OHs. So each one of these is going to get an OH. And then one more. All right, so now I have all of my OHs, and it's just time to add the rest of the hydrogens. So everywhere that there's an opening on a carbon, we're going to add a hydrogen. All right, so what you should find is you now have this molecule that is loaded up with those high energy carbon to carbon and carbon to hydrogen bonds, and each of those yellow pipe cleaners represents a high energy bond. So let's add those to our diagram now. So this is where yellow colored pencil comes into play. Anything that is a carbon to carbon or a carbon to hydrogen needs to be colored with a yellow. And you should find that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of those high energy bonds. Let's go ahead and add this information. So this glucose has a lot of chemical energy. And the chemical energy is in the form of those high energy carbon to carbon and carbon to hydrogen bonds. So I'm just going to draw little arrows here. So we've got a carbon to carbon and a carbon to hydrogen bond. That's where that chemical energy is. All right, now, it's not just glucose that goes into this reaction. You have a bunch of something else sitting here. What are these going to be? If you said oxygen, then you are correct, but not just any oxygen. So let's move this up. Oxygen, when it's in its molecular form, is O2, and you are going to get that from the atmosphere or from the air. So O2, if we make it with our models here, is going to have two oxygen bonded together. And because we know that oxygen needs to have two bonds, we're going to have to double bond these. So it's going to look like this. See how many oxygen molecules you can make with your kit. So that's what we're making. See how many you can make. While you're making those, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing them in. So oxygen looks like this. And how many were you able to make? Hopefully you said 6. So I'm going to make sure that I have 6 oxygen molecules in my diagram. So one more. And oxygen is red, so red colored pencil. All right, so those are my 6 oxygen. Well, these oxygen and the glucose are going to get rearranged. And what are they going to get rearranged into, you might say? Well, I think we know this already. Some of it is going to be carbon dioxide. So I'm actually going to move all the way to the other page here, and we're going to put our carbon dioxide here. Carbon dioxide is CO2, and it's going to go into the atmosphere. So when you breathe out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide, and that's going to go into the atmosphere. The other thing that's going to come out of this reaction is water. And you might be noticing that this is really similar to combustion. And it is. You're totally right. Now the water is also going to go into the atmosphere. So let's see how this is going to work. If I've got my massive glucose here, then I need to start taking these things off and rearranging them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove an OH and an H, and that's going to become one of my water molecules. So I'm going to set that there. Now, when I broke this bond, it's no longer a high energy bond, so I'm going to remove that twist tie. I'm going to take this other H, and I'm going to bond it to another OH to make another water molecule. Now when I did that, I've opened up a carbon, and my carbon is going to combine with an oxygen, and I'm going to make some carbon dioxide. Now you'll notice carbon has to have 4 bonds, oxygen has to have 2 bonds. So now I've got some carbon dioxide. So my carbon dioxide is going to look like that. My water molecules are going to look like this. And if I don't have any high energy bonds, then I need to remove that high energy twist tie. And let's do this. Let's rearrange all this stuff. So this one no longer has a H attached, so that bond is no longer going to be a high energy bond. So using up all of the hydrogens in order to make water, I now have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 water molecules, and I'm going to set those off to the side. Let's see how many carbon dioxide molecules we're able to make with the rest of this. All right, so you should have 6 of these CO2, and you should have 6 of our H2O, and you should have a whole bunch of those high energy bonds here that are not actually being used for anything, but we've got them. So we know that matter cannot be created or destroyed. So any atom that we had that was on this side of the equation also needs to be on this side of the equation. And that's why we ended up with 6 and 6, is because we had to make those into molecules, and they became molecules of water and oxygen. So let's draw these in. I'm going to need my 6 CO2, and those oxygens are double bonded. And I like to kind of draw them all over the place because they're in the atmosphere. They're floating around randomly. All right, so that's my 6 CO2, and I'm also going to need 6 water. Now, the important thing with water is that we know it has this V shape, and that V shape is important because that's what makes it so that it can be polar with the negative charge up there. So even if I draw this kind of floating around, because it's water vapor, I still am going to make sure that it's always forming that V shape. All right, so there are 6 and 6. We're going to go ahead and color these. So oxygens are red. And I'm also going to draw red oxygens for my carbon dioxide. So these should match your model. Now my carbons are black, and we should have 6 carbon because we had 6 carbon on the other side of the equation. So then the only thing that's left here is all of this energy. Now, if this energy is no longer in bonds, then it's no longer chemical energy. And what kind of energy is it? Well, it's the energy that your cells need in order to do things like to move or to perform a chemical reaction or to send a signal or transport a molecule. Whatever it is, it's going to end up as some form of kinetic energy. So on this side of the equation, we are also going to get kinetic energy. And it's not in the bonds, it's being released into the cell. Sometimes it ends up as heat. You might use it to move your vocal cords, in which case it might end up as sound. But it's kinetic energy. So energy is colored yellow. And then the last thing that we need here is our arrow. So I'm going to kind of push everything off to the side. Excuse me while I do that. And we want our arrow to be right in the middle of this chemical equation. So it's going to need to be kind of a big arrow. And this equation that we've just drawn is called cellular respiration. Another way that we could write this in just sort of an easy balanced form is we can have glucose, which is C6H12O6, plus our 6O2 turns into 6CO2 plus 6H2O. Now, the things that are on this page, on this side of the equation, these are going to be our reactants. These are the things that go into the equation. And then on this other side, we have our products. Those are the things that are produced by the reaction. So if I were to zoom out, I don't think I can get quite the whole page here, but you can get a good idea of the fact that glucose and oxygen are going in. Those atoms are getting rearranged into molecules of carbon dioxide and water. And the energy from those high energy bonds is being transformed into kinetic energy that's going to end up in the environment. Now, we wrote up this whole equation for glucose because glucose is primarily what cells are going to use in cellular respiration. But in reality, your cells can use any organic monomer that has these high energy bonds. So this could be a fatty acid. And if it was a fatty acid, you would have a different amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide and water because you still need to balance the equation. But any monomer can really go in here as long as it is a biomolecule, so it has these high energy carbon to carbon and carbon to hydrogen bonds. All right, that's our notes. Please clean everything up and make sure that you've got everything back into your plastic container for the next class. And I will see you all when I get back. Thanks.